Hi there, my name is Parker Beal, and this is The Last Few Years, a web series about women's fashion from the past century and how gender roles, current events, and societal expectations play into the way women present themselves to the world. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing the 1930s. During this decade, the world was experiencing the Great Depression, and even though most of the population couldn't afford the things that they once could, they did what they could with what they had. The democratization of fashion became even more present in this decade. Designers made their patterns widely available, and food producers put patterns on their sacks so that dresses could be made with them. Fashion was literally anywhere that you could find it. This decade brought a new version of femininity to the table. Although the fashion was generally as simple and as natural as the 1920s, clothing hugged the curves and created a very soft and feminine look. While evening wear became dominated by a very body-skimming silhouette, day wear was romantic with soft fabric and soft edges. Hemlines descended back to the ankle, and there was once again a present waist. A slender, elongated torso with wide shoulders was very much desired. One staple of 1930s fashion is the bias cut. To cut on a bias is to cut the fabric at a 45-degree angle against the weave, which would create a very fluid body-skimming garment. Factory-made garments, also known as ready-to-wear garments, became popular as they didn't require much tailoring and could be very easily mass-produced. Zippers also started being added onto clothing as they were a lot less expensive than buttons, and buttons were usually more seen as like an accessory to clothing. Depression and low incomes didn't give women an excuse not to dress well, though. Women were encouraged to shop smart and look smart. A woman who could feed her children and dress fashionably was very much praised. Also, before this decade, women would change clothes for every activity. Although there were still house clothes that were only worn in the home, outfits could be worn for multiple activities became very popular. Pants also became a lot more socially acceptable, but were usually only acceptable while being active or while playing sports. Because of the Depression during the 30s, everyone was looking for things to distract themselves with. That came in the form of Hollywood. Women like Joan Crawford and Bette Davis heavily influenced the fashion industry, and those who could afford to based their styles off of old Hollywood icons. Movies became incredibly popular. Some people would spend any extra money that they had going to the cinemas. Some people would spend hours a day there because movies were incredibly cheap.
Now on to the outfit. The skirt that I'm wearing is made out of cheap wool fabric. When considering fabrics, designers of the 30s would always advertise the rougher the smarter, as rough fabric was always much cheaper. The sweater is a grayish-green color and has some nice knitted detailing. Knitting and other yarn crafts were pretty popular because it was a generally cheap way to make a lot of clothing and accessories that could be tailor-made for each person. I have a white shirt on under it with a rounded collar, and my shoes are black with a modest heel. Overall, this outfit is warm and easy to move around in. Even though the colors are very muted, this outfit is still pretty feminine and very modest. My makeup and hair are also pretty modest. My eyebrows are thin once again, but the arch is much higher. Jean Harlow was known for her incredibly thin arched eyebrows with the ends being flicked upwards. I have petroleum jelly on my eyelids for a little bit of shine, as eyeshadow was generally not worn during the day. Eyeliner was a must, and a brown color smudged all around the eye. Dark, thin lashes were desired in this decade, with a prominent upper lash and a lighter bottom. Mascara would have come in a cream form with a small blush to apply it with. My rouge is applied up high on my cheekbones in a pinkish apricot color, and my lips are overlined into a full pouty shape popularized by old Hollywood stars. Lipstick shades were almost always reddish if worn. My base is matte, and I used a lighter shade than my skin tone to get the sought-after pale look. My hair is once again tied back, but with a deep side part this time. You can really see the inspiration from old Hollywood styles come through in the makeup for this decade.
The main takeaway from this decade is that there was a return to conservatism in fashion. Women couldn't afford to be modern, as their main concern was how to feed their children and how to get their husbands back into the workforce. People desired something comforting, and those feminine looks came to the rescue. At this period, because there wasn't really any work for anyone, the women's role was back at home, figuring out how to best spend any income received and how to keep their families afloat. I think it's really interesting how, even though everyone was struggling, women were still expected to put on a front that they weren't. Women were made to put on this masquerade that everything was fine and that experiencing the Depression wasn't as awful as portrayed. Everything, through the way that they dressed to even how female characters were made to act in the media, was to make everyone and everything seem like there wasn't a global economic shutdown that affected millions of people. Thank you so much for watching the second episode of the Last Few Years series. Comment down below your favorite old Hollywood film star or a fun fact about Depression-age fashion. The next decade we'll discuss the 1940s and how fashion was during World War II. As always, click the like button and the subscribe buttons to see more of this series, and I can't wait to see you next time.